Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first event of the 2026 program calendar, our January monthly lunch and learn session. We're glad to see our attendees on, and that number will grow throughout our session today, as well as those who watch this on demand on our chapter YouTube channel. At our last meeting in December, we had our annual toy drive for Montgomery County Toys for Tots, as well as family services. So thank you again for the turnout there. They were happy when we had a full carload to drop off. So looking forward to more community events the rest of the calendar year ahead. Okay, next month, another annual tradition, I believe they're on their 12th year, is the Project Management for Changes Project Management Day of Service. This will be Saturday, February 21st, so the Saturday after President's Day. It's an all-day event. Again, it'll be at the Stamp Student Union at University of Maryland's College Park campus. There is registration now open. If you look at our calendar newsletter, that a few have come out in the past week. The links are there that you'll need. There is a $40 basically landing fee charge that helps with the event, but well worth it. I've participated in prior years. We have some members of the planning team on the call today. So looking forward to having the student union full. For those not familiar with the day of service, this is where you as project managers can donate your time, talents, expertise, experience with nonprofit leadership, small business leadership. They'll come with a problem that they need solving or something they feel they could better maximize the potential of, and throughout the entire day with a lunch break, you'll scope that down. Bill Newton, anything you wanted to add?
I don't think so. I just note that the price you showed, the registration fee, yeah, it's $45 this year. Inflation.
Yep. Inflation hits us all. Okay, so I believe they'll keep registration open through the first week of February, so stay tuned for that. We'll also plant a seed at our next chapter event, which is 2 Wednesdays from now, February 4th. We'll have Miss Julia Giglio, who will be presenting on managing green projects, and this will be how better to project manage sustainability. PMI has recently invested in green project management and sustainable development project management. They even have a certification for it, so we'll tie that in a little bit as well for those who leave the presentation motivated and want to learn more, and maybe even show, if they do have some experience, show that with the certification. And with certifications in mind, we're one of the few chapters around the world that posts 90% of our content, everything that's approved by our speakers on our chapter YouTube channel with PDU claim codes. So if you find yourself with some downtime, if you find yourself in need of PDUs, this is a good source for that. Okay, we're also one of the few chapters in the world that have a sister Toastmasters group. So they meet 3 times a month. We just had an in-person meeting yesterday, so the next meeting will be virtually next Wednesday. If you came out of 2025 with some goals for 26 on how to be a better public speaker, how to speak with more confidence, how to speak on a variety of topics. This may be a good to dip your toe in. With everything, there is a financial commitment, but we can work with you on that. So there'd be no charge to attend the first meeting or two, but as you go through the program and for the certificates and things of that nature, there is that Toastmasters membership cost. And just a quick save round, Bill put the PM Data Service registration link in chat. So if you're interested, please look more into it. We'd love to have a good representation from the chapter. Speaking of chapters, our sister chapters in the National Capital Region, they're just coming out of elections. So with new leadership comes a little bit of a lag in terms of events. PMI WDC does have a new member orientation next Thursday. And then PMI Baltimore has an event next Tuesday, an in-person event where they'll be looking at the Department of War for some battle-tested planning on how the Marine Corps and Navy transform their project success. Still follow PMI standards, but military projects are different from commercial sector projects. So this could be good if you don't have any exposure to Department of Defense, Department of War, or the military. This could be good if you do and you want to see if Mr. Wagner knows what you know. This would be a good opportunity. So that's in person next Tuesday. We hope that the snow in the National Capital Region will subsist by that time so you can make it. But if there is a snow date, we'll convey that to everyone. And Silver Spring has some new leadership, so they're getting back on track with their second Wednesday of the month, the proceeding Wednesday from our event. So stay tuned for what they have planned for the year. Okay, and now this is what brought you here, so thank you for allowing our few chapter remarks. So we're very pleased and honored to have Mr. Jesse Fewell, who serves as the global chair of project management for the PMBoK Guide. We'll go into what that exactly means. For those wondering how certifications get started, we'll also go into that. He was the creator of the Agile Certified Practitioner at the first onset, and he's also the founder and CEO of his own company, Fewell Innovation. Let me try to get both on screen. Okay. Welcome, Jesse. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure to be hanging out with everybody here at Montgomery County. I'm based on the wrong side of the river over in Fairfax, Virginia. So I appreciate you having riff laugh like me come hang out and talk shop.
Yes, sir. And for those who don't know, this past November, PMBoK version 8, the project management body of knowledge, was arrived in all valid PMI members' dashboards to download and view. I think the hard copy was just released for purchase. There's some people still in our digital society who like having that hard copy desktop reference, so that's available on the PMI store as well as on Amazon if you want to pay a little bit of a markup price to support our global conglomerate. So you were the global chair for this edition. Even I don't exactly know what that means, even with the research and due diligence for this presentation. So what does that role mean in terms of duties and responsibilities?
Well, Matt, it's one of many volunteer opportunities that are available to any member of PMI. If you go to volunteer.pmi.org, the global organization posts volunteer opportunities for you to contribute articles or for you to maybe volunteer on the ethics board, or maybe to work on writing the next round of PMP questions in a smoke-filled room. So there's lots of volunteer opportunities. I've been volunteering with PMI since 2008, and in a variety of capacities. And of course, there's always the opportunity to volunteer at your chapter. So you can have a local impact, or you can have a broader impact depending on which opportunity is interested to you. I happen to be recruited on the PMBoK right around the time the PMBoK 5th edition was coming out. I was challenged by a colleague, Jesse, submit your application to be a volunteer for the software extension to the PMBoK guide. And I believe this is back in 2012, 2013, thereabouts. And on that, let me just think about, yeah, that sounds about right. And that was the first opportunity I got involved with anything related to the PMBoK guide. But I had to apply. And so when you're working on these projects, there's a formal review process to make sure that people put forward a proper profile. They talk about what their background is in a particular topic. For example, there was a recent call for volunteers on the new set of AI guides, practice guides that came out. And so the volunteers submitted their applications, and so I'd like to contribute to the AI guide. And then I volunteered again. I applied to volunteer again for the 6th edition, for the 7th edition. And by the time I got to the 2023, PMI approached me and said, you've been involved in this, why would you like to chair the 8th edition? And now I have to be the one to review hundreds of applications of people who want to be a part of this. And that was the hard part. Who's got experience working with international standards, ANSI, ISO, and who's maybe volunteered to help translate the PMBoK guide into their native language outside of English, and who is interested in representing their industry, representing a different country. And what ended up happening, Matt, is we ended up building one of the most rewarding teams I've ever worked on. So when you have a chance to work in a volunteer capacity, people are in it for the bigger picture. They're not in it for the paycheck. And many of us choose the jobs that we choose because there's a better fit for our skills and our culture. But when you go above and beyond your day job to volunteer for something, there's something special that comes out of it. And so that we had one in-person meeting for 3 days in Los Angeles at the beginning of 2024, March 2024. And then the rest of the project was all virtual. There were 24 volunteers. Half of them were on the core development team writing the content, and the other half were on the review team offering intermediate feedback. They were the first line of defense to make sure that whatever was written was not complete nonsense. And then there were just a series of iterative rounds back and forth. Now, the two teams had a double-blind process where the review team did not know who the dev team was, and vice versa, because it happened that the chair of the 6th and 7th edition, Cindy Dionisio, was on the review team. So we had continuity across the editions. But if the previous global leader of the PMBoK tells you that your paragraph is wrong, you're going to oh, I guess he's right. I guess it should take. So we had to keep that double-blind process in place to make sure that the focus is on the content. And you're going to hear that theme when we talk about all of this during our session today. The focus is on the content and not on the personalities of the people. 2 years, volunteer effort, 95% virtual, global team from over 18 different countries across the world, multiple industries. So it's quite the adventure.
Yep, and quite commendable. I mean, just at the local chapter, we're putting in a couple hours a week, but I mean, I'm guessing you were probably 10 to 15 a week for
Yeah,
100 weeks. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a halftime job. It was a lot. Um, Passion project.
And it matters until version 9 comes out. And if there's a new global chair, then no one's going to go back to version 8. So at least when you write your books, people may still read them 10, 15 years later. But
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. One of the questions people ask is why are there 8 of these? And what do you mean there's going to be a ninth one? Why can't we just be done? And the answer is because humanity is never done. People evolve, the culture evolves, the business evolves. The first PMBoK came out 40 years ago in 1986. And interestingly, the definition of project management had not changed in 40 years. But do you think projects have changed in the last 40 years? Even if we're talking about construction and infrastructure, where now we have LEED certifications, or if we're talking about like social policy, where now we've got new expectations of what is and isn't social norms. There's a lot that's changed over the last 40 years, and so ANSI requires a new edition of the PMBoK every 4 to 5 years. It's part of the certification and accreditation process that makes it the official global standard for project management. And so even though some people might say, like, there really was no meaningful difference between the 5th and the 6th. Well, that's when we introduced the Agile content for the first time. And the 5th edition was the first time we introduced stakeholder management and engagement for the first time. So there's new insights that keep going around each cycle. It's not changing things for the sake of changing things. It's changing things to reflect the nature of evolution of management.
Yep, good point. Every day is a new day, and if we're the same project managers we were 10 years ago, we wasted 10 years. Going back to version 8, a few of our chapter members volunteered in the spring to provide comments. Did those comments go anywhere? And when comments were received from that open window of anybody who volunteered, how were those assessed? Because I'm guessing by that time it was already pretty much written. So
actually, not so much. There were over 1,700 comments that came in across 2 rounds of feedback, and I'm pretty proud of the fact that the product manager. I'm pretty proud of the work that he did to make this what I consider to be the most data-driven PMBoK in history. The first round of surveys around what should go into the PMBoK yielded 44,000 data points about which section do people want in there and which section do they not want in the 8th edition. That was on the front end. And then on the back end, after we have a draft, the first round, which is called a draft comment period, open it up to everybody in the world. Anybody could go into the tool and type in their recommendations for the body of knowledge, the second half of the book, and we got about close to 900 comments there. No, I'm sorry. 9,000 comments. So we had 17,000 comments, because I remember each of us had like well over 100 comments to go through. And we look at every single one without your name attached. So again, there's a lot of work to make sure there's a lot of anonymity on the input, on the processes, to focus on the core content. So if your idea stood on its own merit, it was included in the revisions that came out in the next draft. And then the ANSI comment period focused on the standard part of the document, where we got yet another 7,000 to 8,000 comments just on the first half of the document, around the principles, the core definitions, a lot of drama about the definitions, what is a project, and also the system for value delivery. Yeah, Matt, every single comment that was submitted was looked at. Some were submitted in a way that did not follow the instructions. For example, they were not in. Sometimes we had about 3-4 dozen comments that were not in English, and the instructions were to submit them in English. So we had to, like, all right, there's only 3-4 dozen here. Let's translate them and see if there's some goodness here. The fact that you got your team together and said, here's some things that we think ought to be submitted is hugely helpful. It's hugely important. In fact, that was my first bit of contribution to the 5th edition. I was working on that software extension team, and there were a couple of concerns about this 5th edition coming out, and we were supposed to be a supplement to it, an appendix to it, and we were out of sync. And it's like, I'll raise my hand and I'll host a team meeting. We got together and collected some, and then I typed in the comments. Ta-da! They made it into the 5th edition. So I hope that there were a handful of people that maybe got to see at least 1 or 2 of their comments get in there, because all of it was super helpful.
Great to hear. And you mentioned perceived bias in these days of Gen AI helping draft everything from academic papers to bodies of knowledge to our own meeting minutes and transcripts. What role did AI play in the version 8 drafting and publication process?
AI,
from what you can say.
I can tell you, AI was banned. It was absolutely prohibited from being used in any way. There's actually a little clause in the preface. I don't know about the preface, but in the front matter of the document, saying that no AI was used in the creation of this, and anybody's read it, which is true. There was a lot of work that went into finding what was really good in the 6th edition, what was really good in the process groups practice guide, what was really good in the 7th edition, and then, yes, ladies and gentlemen, manually typing every single word in there. Now, granted, we had a volunteer team of a dozen authors and a dozen reviewers, and so the workload was distributed and rotated so that no one person wholly owned a topic. There was Eduardo Favari, for example, is very passionate about sustainable project management, and he said, I want to take a stab at this and write an appendix about sustainability, and I want to refine the principle around sustainability. Okay, you can get us started, but there's going to be 2 more rounds from 2 other people working on it. So no AI, it was all manual and it was all collaborative.
Do you think that'll stay the course with version 9, 10, 11? Because one could argue it could be short-sighted that you're working hard but not smart. Thoughts?
So at the risk of going a little bit on a tangent, Matt, and I think those of you who are on the call might have some experience with this when you use Gen AI. What I find with Gen AI is it's really good at summarizing, maximizing what's already there. It's not necessarily creating new knowledge as it is repackaging, refactoring, or rejiggering existing knowledge. And for the work that goes into formal standards for professional associations, I think that's an open debate, because if a standard is supposed to reflect what exists right now, well, then someone would say, well, the bot knows. Oh, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I can tell you there would be no bot that would have told us to rename integration management from from the old knowledge areas to be the governance performance domain. That was something that came out of a rough debate, or to pull procurement out from being a core competency to being an appendix. Those were hot debates that we had, and maybe an AI may have stumbled across the idea, but whether or not it would pass the sniff test from 24 global volunteers and 1,400 reviewers. I think that's an open debate. It'd be interesting to see.
Okay, thanks for your candor there. I guess time will tell. Okay, let's dive into the book. You mentioned that the definition of a project changed for the first time in 4 decades. Version 8 still keeping the temporary verbiage of if it's not temporary, it's operations. If it's temporary, it's a project. But you guys did remove to create a unique product, service, or result with the verbiage, a temporary endeavor to create value. Why was this done, and what does that new definition expand to of maybe what wasn't a project in version 1 to 7, but is now in version 8?
This was a development that happened late in the project. We had about a few months left before the final draft was to be submitted for edit, and what came out towards the end of this was a challenge from PMI leadership. They did not tell us why. They did not tell us what motivated the challenge, but the challenge was, is it time to rethink some of the core definitions around project management? And it was a provocative ask because it was intended. It was phrased in a way that invited us to explore the topic without mandating a specific outcome. Because you know how executives can be. They can ask you a question when they're really telling you to do something. But this was one where they had to be very careful, because ANSI has some very specific and firm requirements about what you can say and what you can't say, what you can tell a team to do and tell a team not to do. But rather, this fit within the mandate of the standard. Is it time? Like, are the definitions themselves part of the scope of the PMBoK? And the answer is, of course, yes, they're right there. But there had been this 40-year habit of just copy pasting those out of tradition. And I remember being on these projects. I was on the core team for the 7th edition. I co-wrote the Agile content for the 6th, and even on the 5th edition. Like, we never really asked whether these definitions still resonated. So we had some debates, we had some conversations, and what eventually came is that the growing conviction over the last 20 years around project management is that a project is no longer merely about doing something. It's no longer merely about giving or delivering the thing, product, service, or result. That's not the goal. That's not the objective. The objective is bigger than that. Why are we delivering the bridge? Because if you build a bridge and nobody uses it because there aren't upstream traffic management policies and infrastructure put in place, that's a lot of wasted money, a lot of wasted opportunity. If you put in a new HR system and nobody knows how to use it, you're not getting all of the efficiencies and the goals and the gains out of it. So make sure your project plan includes training. And so these were the debates and the conversations we had, and we absolutely reaffirmed that projects are not operations. They're temporary in nature. Operations are repeated and similar again and again. But what is evolving, what has evolved over the last couple of decades is this emphasis on outcomes. And even in our community, benefits realization is something that we've talked about a lot, and it's very elusive. Many organizations struggle with it. Most organizations struggle with benefits realization. And then language has shifted in the marketplace. between the rise of product management and the agile movement and design thinking, where value is the new term of art relative to maybe 40 years ago. And so all of that pointed to the idea that it's time for us to reflect in the global standard the new market expectation of what the project is about. It's not about the outputs, it's about the outcomes.
Great point. And just a facilitation note, if anyone has any questions, if they want to put them in chat, we'll moderate those for you. Going back to version 7, the project management principles were 12 single element components that read like stewardship, leadership. One word isn't really a principle. It's maybe a characteristic. But in version 8, you guys shortened that down to 6 that really read more like philosophies or challenges that are led by action verbs. Adopt a holistic view, build an empowered culture. I think this is a welcome change in my mind, as those single words are too interpretive. So what do the 6 principles equate to in your mind of what a reviewing project manager should take away?
Yeah, it's a good call out, Matt. I think one of the things that was really confusing about the principles in the 7th edition was the fact that there were multiple formattings of the principles. So one of the principles was actually a proper sentence: be an accountable steward. And yet there was one, the graphic, it said stewardship. And so to your point, a lot of people came away with that saying the value is the word stewardship, when in fact there was a full sentence and a full paragraph describing what it meant. That was one bit of feedback, exactly what you mentioned, that informed our plan for the 8th edition. The other bit of feedback was that they felt a little bit too overwhelming. There were a dozen of them, and some of them felt overlapping. There was one around complexity, and then there was another one around systems thinking, and so, like, okay, aren't those the same thing? And so on the one hand, and then the third critique. So the one critique was that the formatting was confusing. The second critique was they were overwhelming with 12 of them. And the third critique was they just feel too fluffy. It doesn't feel practical. Like, what am I supposed to do? So we set about to do a complete remapping of all the content, because actually there's a fourth critique. Not only were the 12 overwhelming, but there was some collision or overlap or duplication. So risk management, or like take advantage of risks and opportunities, was another one of the principles in the 7th edition. But there was also an entire section dedicated to a risk management framework. And so there was a lot of confusion. Why are you covering this twice? So we did an entire audit to make sure that whatever topic, it would have a home. And the principles are intended to be universal and guiding all projects all the time. And then, by the way, if you want to talk about risks, we can talk about that as a technique, as a practice. Not even a technique, but as it's a performance domain. And if we want to talk about tailoring, that's a fundamental practice within project management, not to be called out as a principle. And so there was the removal of the duplication. There was also the rationalization of them, merging and reality, to make sure that the principles stood on their own merit. And then for the first time, we included concrete examples of the principles in action. And there's one example that talks about embed quality in everything you do. And the example is that if you're working to expand a logistics operation into a new geographic region, a proper and responsible project plan would include making sure that your operations are going to be compliant with local regulations and and laws. But embedding quality means thinking about the customer consumer experience and thinking that, well, maybe the downstream vendors that you're using, the distribution channels, they have higher standards for shipping and higher standards for operations than just what the government regulations are. And so that's just one example that we offered as a way to embed a quality mindset into everything you're doing with your projects. In many ways, although the 8th edition also includes principles that were indeed informed by the 7th edition, they were very much overhauled.
I think that PMs from a performance management perspective are probably to date still judged by the iron triangle of cost, schedule, performance. Could these principles be used to get above just the iron triangle and the other important parts of being a project manager? Or do you think there are more things to keep in your hip pocket, but not necessarily something you should be judged on a performance review because it's not in your control?
Yeah, the triple constraint was a topic that did come up, and it was the review team that reinforced to me. I was the bridge as the chair between the dev team and the review team, and there was some content in the draft that talked about the triple constraint. The review team came back and said, Jesse, I don't know if you got the memo, but the triple constraint is obsolete as a concept. In 2009, with the 4th edition of the PMBoK, it was replaced by multiple constraint concept. And the multi-constraint concept in the 4th edition listed 6. So you had scope, schedule, cost, but also risk, also quality, compliance, expectation, value proposition, the business case. So there's so many constraints that are placed upon a project that just limiting it to the triple constraint is a little naive. It might be that our executives are very concerned about cost, and they're very concerned about time, and they're very concerned about getting what they paid for. But if you deliver on budget, on schedule, on scope, and you're not meeting your security compliance requirements, and then you're going to be vulnerable to hackers, or you're going to be subject to other unwanted events, then it's not a successful project. So I think, Matt, you're the first one who's made a connection to the principles as being the new mental model to replace a constraint-based approach to thinking about projects. Yes, the constraints are important, and they're still mentioned to some degree in the 8th edition. But really, are you an accountable leader? Are you leading this as opposed to just playing in the spreadsheet? Hi, I'm Jesse. I'm a project manager. I live in my spreadsheets all the time. And are you embedding quality in everything you do? Are you focusing on the value proposition of return on investment, not merely investment? So it's an intriguing way to think about it. I don't think I've ever really considered the principles to be a way to supplement that or replace the thinking as much as they've been there on the side. So you've got me kind of curious and tinkering in my brain a little.
Great. And I think that's a heed to all our audience members that inside the PM, inside baseball, we understand that it's not cost, schedule, performance, but our C-suiters, our CIOs, CEOs, COOs are still very minded that. So that's an opportunity for us to educate and grow that thinking. Because
I'll even add to that. I would say that scope, schedule, cost are table stakes. That if you're on top of your scope, schedule, cost, it earns you the right to talk about ROI. It earns you the right to talk about the value proposition, because those things are really just they're expected to be the baseline of what any project should be. A project should be healthy. if your project's healthy, then you can start talking to executives at their level about their concerns.
Yep, great point. You mentioned tailoring. That's mentioned in PMBoK version 8 163 times.
Wow.
I guess my definition of tailoring is that it allows for your project practices to be customized to what the project is. You can't supervise the same across the board. You can't manage a project the same across the board. It has to be tailored to the customer needs, any constraints that you have today, any constraints that you have in the future. Why would you say tailoring is so weaved in version 8 and why it's so important to today's project management?
I'm looking at the data to see if the data is here. I don't have the stat on me, but if you remember that survey, they yielded 40,000 data points on the front end of building this thing to find out what do people want. An overwhelming supermajority of respondents said tailoring is mission critical for the PMBoK. It has to be in there. It's a fundamental core of what project management is about. And so we've talked about this for decades. Tailoring has been mentioned in the PMBoK guide forever. But people were asking, there were two things that were happening, I think, over the course of the last 10, 20 years. Our community, let's be honest, we like following the process. And there are a lot of people who are saying, the reason my project is red is because nobody else is following the process. Or the reason your project is red because you, project manager, don't follow the process the way I do. And that compliance mindset tends to miss a lot of opportunity. And that's what tailoring was intended to do. Tailoring was intended to find a way where we as project leaders can find the sweet spot for different practices, maybe pulling out additional artifacts that we don't need that created too much overhead. And it wasn't until the 7th edition where we finally told people, okay, I know you want to do this. You might be struggling with how. Here's how to do tailoring. And so there's a dedicated section in the 7th edition around how to do tailoring of the project and its approaches, tailoring the plans and the processes. And also, in the 6th edition, there were some tailoring considerations for each of the knowledge areas, and they were just considerations, but not like a thought model of how to go through the whole. And then the 7th edition, he elaborated those tailoring considerations a little bit more. And so with the 8th edition, let's keep and refine that guidance on how to do tailoring. So there's still an entire dedicated section on how to do it. But then let's also come up with some concrete examples. Here's what a tailored approach would look like for this, for scope management in this industry. Or here's what tailored approach to schedule performance domain would look like for this life cycle. And so the hope is that we're encouraging practitioners across the world, across industries, to look at their project approach, their project plan before they get started and say, is this fit for use? Is our project plan appropriate for what we need to do in the life cycle that we have and the industry that we have, the oversight that we have? But there's still, as a community, we still have a lot of baggage around it. We still very much want everything to be laid out sequentially. Many of us, right? Some of us are a little bit more renegade than others. But to your point, by including it, by sprinkling it throughout the whole document and including some concrete examples, the hope is that it'll be a little bit easier for people.
And in terms of actually how you digitally manage those projects. In the past year, we've seen Microsoft Project Online be end of service, despite that we live in a SaaS world. Practitioners are going on PMI chapter speaking tours stating that Microsoft Planner is a new Microsoft project. I personally disagree with that because I think Planner is a Kanban board. It doesn't have the ability to add dependencies and the additional detail you really need to add a project. So in your mind, how should projects be digitally tracked in the year 2026?
Oh, so I suffer from project management tool fatigue. There are just so many out there, and they all do different things, and they all have their own sweet spot. Uh, for a while there, Primavera was the go-to solution, and now I know a number of people are jumping onto the Atlassian stack with Jira and Jira Align, and other people are like, no, we're a ServiceNow shop, so we're going to use SPM as our PPM tool. One of the things, it's all exhausting and overwhelming and confusing. And I would say that there's two things to take a look at. One, take a look at a multi-tool strategy and this is something that I'm working out with one of the organizations I'm working with these days. I'm working with doing some work with BAE systems, and they use one tool to manage the portfolio. So here's a list of all the demands and what stage they're in maturity, and that tool does have a module for requirements management, but it's not fully robust for what's needed in the way of a requirements traceability matrix, in the way of a requirements change log. And so now we've just announced an internal enterprise solution for requirements management, which is not even on ServiceNow. And then in addition to that, you got people who are saying, neither the portfolio tool nor the requirements management tool are really good with backlogs and user stories. And so I want to go to Azure DevOps, and I'm going to use that to manage all of my, and you look at Azure DevOps, and you're like, good night. This is actually a robust tool. It's got everything, soup to nuts. It's got some requirements, agile requirement stuff, agile testing, automation in there for software projects. So it's not really a good selection if you're running an infrastructure project or a policy project. Like, what's the automated test you're going to have for a new HR policy? I don't know. And then, of course, to round it off, you got everybody who's like, I still want to use my Jira. Leave me alone. So I would recommend that in your organization, advocate for a multi-tool strategy, and maybe of all the tools that are out there, pick what are the 3 or 4 that are approved for usage, and then offer people guidelines on which ones to use for when. The one monkey wrench in all of that is AI, because now you've got some startups who are wanting to be the AI PM. Spinach.io is one of them that is going to, no matter what platform you're on, is going to enter into your meetings. It's going to transcribe the meeting. It's going to generate a Gen AI summary of it. And then it's going to kick off an agentic set of processes to create action items in Outlook for you. And that's, the demos are very exciting, but the proof is yet to be in the pudding, so to speak. So it's a very interesting time to be in project management tooling, because no one vendor has it all, and those that do tend to be specific to one industry. So your mileage may vary, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yep, and I think it's what the company can afford. A lot of small businesses may not be able to afford a more robust tool like a ServiceNow license package. So in the past, we could all afford Microsoft Project usually, but we'll see how that goes. So
at the end of the day, and there's also the rise of these general purpose tools. There's one government agency I'm working with right now a regional airport authority, and their IT shop said, we're going with ClickUp. And I was like, hey, that's interesting because, the local school district I'm working with also just picked ClickUp. And then you go into ClickUp and you realize there are about 4 or 5 dozen templates for how to run a project in ClickUp. You got to pick a template one. So Monday.com is another one where, okay, how are you going to configure? I end up going back to spreadsheets, Matt. So that's my weakness.
That would be the headline from this talk.
Yeah, okay, global PMBoK chair uses spreadsheets.
Yep. Okay, last 3 months, you and your colleagues and peers have been on the media tour, but one thing that's been common is you hammering home that PMBoK version 8, the 3 parts of it, aren't 100% tied to the current or future PMP exam, as the PMP exam is to test your knowledge and experience of being a project manager. I follow a little bit there, because how does that make sense for a test that so many people don't pass the first time for an age where so many of us are doing project management differently? So how can there be one standardized test to say, I am a project management professional on how I manage projects when there's so much diversity there? Your thoughts?
All right.
It
so
seems
Matt,
like we're setting people up for failure, but
you and I probably should have said this at the very beginning, but ladies and gentlemen, let it be said here on record and the recording that the views and opinions expressed by Matt Lowy and Jesse Fewell are their own and do not represent either the PMI chapter of Montgomery County or the Project Management Institute.
Actually, that was in your introduction slide in small print, so we're covered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So here it comes. So I was involved in the creation of the PMI ACP, and been currently involved in the Scrum Alliance's work on refining its Agile coaching certifications. So I'm coming at this kind of from an Agile perspective, and which is niche, right? There's a certain niche of projects that are fit for an Agile approach, ones where there's a high degree of uncertainty, but there's also a lot of tolerance for exploration, and there's opportunities for earlier capture of value. You might be working on a large scale construction project, so like the big mixing bowl in Springfield, Virginia. Those of you who were around at the time noticed that they were opening up new ramps and new lanes one at a time, as opposed to just revealing, ta-da, here's your new Wilson Bridge. But not every project, it makes sense to be phased out that way. But for the certification around an Agile approach, particularly innovation oriented and digital kinds of projects, I was comfortable defining the learning objectives. I was comfortable with the role delineation study that went into that. For the PMP, it's a little bit difficult. I think there's a problem. I think it's hard to say that there's one certification that captures the core substance of what it means to be a project manager in any industry, in any life cycle. 50% of the PMP questions now are Agile related. And so like if you never use backlogs and stories or Scrum Masters, and now you're going to have to study that to pass the test, is that appropriate? I don't know. Like as an Agilist, I kind of like the idea of everybody having to learn what I know, but I don't know that that's totally relevant all the time. And so there is a problem with that, Matt. I'm curious, like what would we do otherwise? Like, because the PMP has always been under a lot of criticism for being a test that my cat could pass, but then some of the grads can't PM their way out of a paper bag.
Sure. Like I think from a hiring manager perspective, I look at a PMP like a high school diploma. I've had some peers and superiors say it's more of a bachelor's degree than a high school diploma. But I mean, I've had great PMs that couldn't pass the test, and PMI hasn't published the pass-fail rate since 2005 for any of their exams. And I just challenged them that in this new world of there's data for everything, why can't you make those pass-fail rates?
Oh, they have the data. It's just a question of whether that data is helpful or harmful. If you think about it, if they publish the pass-fail rate and it's something like 45% pass on their first try, or 45% pass on any given try, suddenly now people are less likely to even try. On the other hand, if the case is like with the certified Scrum Master exam, where 95 people pass on their first try, so
well, the open book helps with that.
Yeah. And then you're like, well, that's not really rigorous, is it? Well, that exam that I had at the end of my 3-day ProSci training, I don't know, that was an exam. So each certification, the exam itself is it's just tricky. But from a PMBoK point of view, the most important thing is what you called out. The PMBoK is not a study guide for the PMP. It is not. If you hope to pass the PMP by reading and studying the PMBoK, you will fail, period. Rather, the PMBoK guide is a guide to the body of knowledge in order to inform your craft, inform your profession. The PMP is intended to test your knowledge, but also your mindset. Also some core questions around ethics. My wife is a labor and delivery nurse, and she is in her role now as a nurse mentor. She's having to help nurses that have been doing their job for 20, 30 years pass renew their certifications. And she's got some nurses being like, I get test anxiety. I've been doing this for 20, 30 years. And like, why is it that the answer that I give is the wrong answer? She has to remind them, don't give the real world answer, give the textbook answer. And the textbook is not the PMBoK guide. So if you're interested in passing the PMP, I would recommend you reach out to the chapter leadership on the resources available that to help you with that. But the PMBoK guide is really about practice.
Thanks for clearing that up. One thing that hasn't changed with the new version is the traditional 5 focus areas: initiation, planning, execution, and an enclosure. I think you alluded to it a little bit, that there's so many different project focus areas now. There's the Agile guide, there's the AI project one that just came out with the CPMI of new phases to run certain kind of projects. So how do these kind of legacy 5 focus areas, are they still successful to project success? If fuel and innovations run a project, do they still have those 5 focus areas broken down in their reporting?
Yeah, I could hear your mind kind of accidentally calling them phases.
And I had to correct myself. But
yeah, and if you Google project lifecycle, you're going to get hit with dozens and dozens of infographics showing those 5 focus areas, formerly known as process groups. And so this has been a challenge for a lot of us who are deep in this material. Initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, closing are not project phases. They're things that we need to do to pay attention to over the course of an entire project. Now, traditionally, we called them process groups because they were a convenient categorization, convenient holding place or a bucket for all of the processes. But in this last round, we had the conversation. So, well, what if I don't have formal processes at my startup company? Do I no longer care about planning? No. Well, what if I don't have processes? Should I use the ones in PMBoK for my startup? Not necessarily. How do you want to do the planning? Well, I think maybe we get the team together and we scope out maybe some major milestones. Great. Start with that. But that's not a formal process. Again, does that fit your culture? Is that what the project needs? Do you need formal processes with tab A into slot B? And so we can't call these process groups anymore. They're more than that. They're more fundamental than that. These are things that every project, every industry, every time really need to be thinking about. Did we get off on the right foot? Do we know where we're going? How well are we doing? And when are we done? Those are some basic executive level questions that every PM should be able to answer. And to your point, Matt, because they're general, they don't offer a lot of context that the AI guide offers or the Agile Practice Guide offers. Big shout out, the Agile Practice Guide, first edition. I was a part of that in 2017. The second edition is releasing next month on the 25th anniversary of the Agile Manifesto. And in there's a lot more guidance on, the product life cycle and what are some of the Agile specific considerations for a project. But there's still going to be those 5 core questions around initiating, planning, and so on. So the way I would embrace it, the way I would look at it is that the 5 focus areas in the PMBoK are really generalist, universal, and then each of the niche guides go into the specifics, nuances of that particular area.
Thank you. Version 8's 401 pages with pretty detailed verbiage, sometimes dry at times. No jokes or humor weaved in, but if a certified PMP, most of us on the call have 30 to 45 dedicated minutes, what's your recommended reading list of what they should review? They come out of today motivated, they have a half hour, kind of what's your Cliff Note version of what pages they should go on or sections?
Well, if I put my consultant hat back on, it depends. If you're newer in your journey, if you're connected to your chapter today because you want to get a head start, you want to get some momentum, kind of getting your project management career moving and grooving, I would encourage you to take a look at the performance domains. I would encourage you to take a look at what are the key considerations for scope? What are the key considerations for your resources? Take a look at those processes and see how a structured sequence of activities can fulfill the performance expectations around scope performance, could fulfill the expectations around schedule performance. If, on the other hand, you're a little bit more on the mid-level of your career, I would encourage you to take a look at those principles. Maybe you're starting to get really good at the fundamental dynamics, but you're losing sight of the forest for the trees. You got the mechanics down and the processes, and yet somewhere along the line, everyone's asking, are you even the project manager? I don't see you leading. Or somewhere along the line, they're saying, you don't see the big picture. Where's your holistic perspective? I would encourage you to take a look at the principles as a way to graduate from that early career mindset to a mid to senior career mindset. And then if you're much more senior in your journey, you've been doing this PM thing for solid 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and you're looking to be more marketable, not just in the marketplace, but marketable inside your own organization with your own executives, I would encourage you to focus on everything related to value. You, as a senior PM, by the time you get a couple of scars and stripes, you should be able to guide a project over the finish line, not a problem. The hard part is telling the story. Can you tell the story about whether the project was even worth it? One of the the more valuable resources that's come out from PMI, and at the same time as this PMBoK guide, is the PMI's project success research. And there's a new measure for project success, according to the Project Management Institute, and it's called Net Project Promoter Score, NPPS, or Success NPSS. On a scale of 1 to 10, do the stakeholders agree that the project was worth the time, effort, investment? And when you do the math, it turned out at the end of last year, at the end of 24, less than half of all projects worldwide, something like 48%, were able to meet that threshold. Less than half of projects were even worth doing. Then at the end of 2025, they ran the survey again globally and found that the number had bumped up 3 points. Now it's more like 52% of all, 52% of all projects worldwide, all industries, were indeed worth doing. That's statistically significant. What changed? And what changed was the switching of the mindset around the outcomes. And so there's, I'm typing it in here, project success. That's what I would encourage you to take a look at if you're a senior practitioner, as someone who wants to raise your brand and raise the value of your services to the executive level. So the PMBoK really, what was intentional about the 8th edition relative to the 7th edition is that we did try to put in a lot for those early career practitioners who are starting off and need a little bit of help with the mechanics. And that's where the old processes and the key considerations were really helpful. But there's some stuff there for senior PMs as well.
Great. So that's your reading assignment for where you fall in your career. Speaking of careers, I'm a big believer in lifelong learning, just like you. At the same time, I think all the letters after your name don't mean much if you're not bringing value to the current effort at hand. Coach Saban used to take a night to enjoy a national championship, and then the next morning it was focused on recruiting for the next season. So I kind of have that approach. But currently you hold 23 active certifications. What does proving that knowledge mean to you in terms of getting the certification for the discipline that you're focused on? And then I may have another follow-up in terms of how you can manage all those, if it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, we got a couple minutes left here. Why so many certifications? Well, I believe in certs. I got my PMP as my first post collegiate recognition. Learning and recognition is really what it's about. I had the benefit of working with Mike Griffiths, who was the chair of the 7th edition and is currently on staff at PMI. And he helped me understand that certifications are fundamentally about learning and recognition. And, all of us like learning. We all like learning new things and trying new things out. But where do I go? Do I go to YouTube? Do I go to Google? Do I go to my uncle? Like, where do I go? And so an accredited program, to me, is something that is already structured. It's already vetted. I don't have to do a lot of research on it. I can just buy it. And then I've got some confidence that I'm getting some good content. Not always the case, I know, but that's a good place to start. And then if there's a badge at the end, a little gold star, I get the recognition that I'm going for. Now, some of them are a little bit more rote and pro forma. There's not really a lot of rigor around it. But I've done some of the Coursera programs, and there were several hours of content there that I had to sift through to get that Coursera specialization in digital transformation. I'm still working on it. Haven't got it done yet. So that's why I do it. I do it so that I have the confidence of knowing that I'm getting a structured program, and I get a little bit of an audit that says that I completed the learning and it's a publicly displayable. So it's less about my ego and it's more about being intentional about the learning.
Thank you. Keep it up. You mentioned digital transformation. Just a quick cheap plug. Jesse wrote the book Untapped Agility in 2020, and that was more focused on the foundation digital transformation, following a 3-tier pattern of boost, barrier, and rebound. So if you're interested, we will be wrapping up signed copies at our in-person meeting 2 Wednesdays from now. You also have a great personal standard of making time for any portfolio program project practitioner that reaches out to you, which kind of makes that open door policy on a global stage. You made time for me when I had interest in putting this together. How do you kind of come up with that standard, and what are your routines to make time for it? A lot of us can't even keep up with replying to emails from the people we know. How do you give such hospitality to the whole world?
Well, there's a couple of tricks. One of the tricks is that you pick a program that's encapsulated inside a specific 3-day workshop. So I started my certification as a leadership agility executive coach with Bill Joyner with a 3-day workshop in Boston. So I put the time on the calendar. I submitted the PTO. Bought the plane tickets and said, "This is I want the skills of an executive coach." And I got there and I knocked it out. And now I've put enough effort and time in where all I got to do is find 1 or 2 coaching clients and then do the practicum asynchronously online on my own time, and then do a closeout interview. It was very practical certification program, but it started with a block of time. So that's tip number 1, block of time, find it there. Another one is seize your free time. Right now, I don't have a lot of free time. I actually did have a lot of free time. I'm going to say at the beginning so over the summer, I had some free time and I signed up for that digital transformation certification from IBM and University of Virginia. And I was excited about it. And I'm clicking through the lessons, and then boom, work catches up with me. And now what I thought was my free time is actually overtime at the office. And so tip number 2 is to be patient with reality. The reality is that there might be some ebbs and flows of your availability. And, simply pausing Netflix is not enough. And you have to kind of decide, well, instead of binging on this, on the one hand, I do have to decide binging on this the latest season of The Witcher, and instead binging on the online lessons in the course. That's one, but then sometimes work takes over, life takes over. So give yourself a little bit of patience, a little bit of grace. So those are 2 hacks that might help.
Great advice. Last question, kind of a fun one. If you could be a part of any project management team throughout history, what would it be and why? Why you're thinking? Mine would be the GW Parkway renovations that are currently ongoing, that the Park Service said would be done by the end of 2025, but it's still giving angst to my morning commute to the Pentagon every day. So that's my project. What would be yours?
Well, I'll tell you this. The project I would not want it to be on, that we talk about in the PMBoK guide, is the Sydney Opera House. This was a project that won the Nobel Prize for architecture when it was first approved and envisioned, and it was going to get, but then they had to go build the thing, and delays started coming and cost overruns. There was one point where the construction team went on a riot and captured the entire island, to where now police had to come in and essentially wrest control of the work site away from disgruntled workers. And then there was an activist parliamentarian who got into office on the platform of firing the architect who won the Nobel Prize. And so, man, what a failure of a project. 10x over budget, 10x over schedule, and one of the great top 10 UNESCO heritage sites of the world and symbol of human progress. On the one hand, totally worth doing. On the other hand, totally painful. Would not want to be on the painful part. I'm rather just go for a vacation tourist visit.
Fair enough. Well, we can't thank you again for your time. Round of applause and standing ovation for your dedication to service, everything you put into this version 8, which at least through 2030, 2031, maybe 2032, will have legs and add value to project managers around the world. So anything you'd like to plug coming up for you?
Yes. Mentioned earlier today, check out the Project Management Day of Service, where you can volunteer and get up to 8 PDUs for helping a nonprofit with your project management skills. It's coming up next month. Registrations are open, and it's a great way to have your project management skills have impact, earn some PDUs at the same process, and get some good networking in. I volunteered myself in the past, and the organizers are dear friends, so go check it out.
Great. Well, thank you again. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see everyone in 2 Wednesdays, and you have a 1 in 5 chance to win a signed copy of Untapped Agility. Thank you.
Take it easy.